Welcome to the third episode of the Moment After podcast. This is going to be a non-spoilers review of Marvel's newest offering, Ant-Man and the Wasp. It stars Paul Rudd as Scott Lang and Ant-Man, Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne and Wasp, Michael Douglas is back as Hank Pym, Michael Pena is back as Lewis, Hannah John Carmen makes her first appearance in the franchise as Ghost, Walton Goggins plays Sonny Birch, Lawrence Fishburne comes in as Bill Foster, and Michelle Pfeiffer is also in the movie. It's directed by Peyton Reed and written by Chris McKenna, Eric Summers, Paul Rudd, Andrew Barrer, and Gabriel Ferrari. In my list of top Marvel movies, Ant-Man, the original Ant-Man, is number 7. It's not a bad number when you consider that Captain America Civil War is right in front of it. It's a great movie. So in my mind, I was very excited for Ant-Man and the Wasp, and it had a lot to live up to. And it does. The story takes place in between Civil War and Infinity War, and we see how Scott's been affected by his actions in Germany. I really like that because we had Civil War, then we had Doctor Strange, Guardians 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Ragnarok, Black Panther, and Infinity War. Then we get Ant-Man and the Wasp. Doctor Strange, Guardians 2, and Ragnarok had nothing to do whatsoever with Civil War. Spider-Man kinda mentions it, but quick. And since he's on Iron Man's side, he's technically sanctioned, right? Black Panther experienced no real consequence for his hunting down of Bucky. Then Infinity War touched on Civil War very briefly with Tony and Cap, but didn't really give us any new information about the fallout of what happened. Ant-Man and the Wasp has been the first MCU movie to come out that has been a direct result of Captain America Civil War, and it is very interesting to see how it's handled. It's also interesting to see how Scott's actions affected Hope and Hank. Remember, Ant-Man was on Captain America's side in Civil War, and regardless of what anyone may say, in Civil War, Captain America, his ideals, and his side are painted to be the ones who are doing what is right, even if the government doesn't see it that way. I love that. It reminds me of Iron Man 3 when Tony is dealing with his PTSD of seeing everything coming to Earth in Avengers and how it affected Pepper. To that end, I loved the relationship between Hank and Scott, Hope and Scott, and really just all the characters in general. One relationship that didn't get into too much but was really interesting was Hank and Bill Foster. We clearly get the idea that Hank is a difficult guy to work with in the first Ant-Man movie. But we really get an idea of how other people see Hank and the way Hank sees those relationships as well. It's really cool. When you're doing a sequel, you have a tendency to want to go bigger than last time, right? Bigger stakes, bigger set pieces, bigger threats. I mean, look at Guardians 2. They fought a freaking planet, but Ant-Man and the Wasp kind of kept it in its pocket, right? Very condensed, very close to home story. They didn't go, oh, well, Ant-Man is Ant-Man now, so he needs to fight and stop this huge world-ending catastrophe. No. The first one was a heist film where the villain was trying to take over a company. Then in Ant-Man and the Wasp, yeah, the stakes are higher for the characters, but it's not a world-ending event. As a matter of fact, no one would really even notice if their mission was a success or a failure, and that's what I like about the Ant-Man movies. He connects to the overall MCU, but when he does his own thing, he is doing his own thing, and you can recognize why the other heroes wouldn't be a part of it. Where they do go bigger and better was exactly what I wanted to see, so I can forgive him for that. The powers and how they're used are insane. Since Scott is still learning how to use his powers and what the limits are on the powers and what he can physically do, we get Hope Van Dyne as the Wasp, and she is fantastic. She owns every room she is in. Evangeline Lilly gave a great performance here. She's the best part of the movie, in my opinion. The way she uses the shrinking and growing abilities and hand-to-hand combat is really cool. But we've seen that. Scott did that in Ant-Man. Not to the same level of proficiency, but he did do it. They shine here where they're thinking outside of the box. She's enlarging objects you'd never think to use as weapons. They had this in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler, but when she shrinks down the van that she's in, goes up underneath the other van and enlarges again to flip the enemy van down the hill of San Francisco. It was awesome. I loved seeing that on the big screen. Because we saw it on the small screen, you're like, oh wow, that's really cool, that's a good idea. But seeing it on the big screen, it's really impactful. Another aspect that they went bigger on was the de-aging effects, right? They looked incredible in the first Ant-Man when they de-aged Michael Douglas for the young Hank Pym. And in this one they said, oh, you thought one character was good? What do you think of doing multiple characters at the same time? And they looked just as good. They looked even better than that original one. If you didn't know that they were actually older, you'd never know. They just looked like young people. It was awesome. Now, I know a lot of people loved Michael Peña's character in the first one, and I did too. I thought he was really funny. The way they made the mouths of the people in the flashbacks match up to the ludicrous way that he's speaking was hysterical. He's the exact same way in this movie, and I don't know if they just used him more, or if in Ant-Man he was at like an 8, and then in this one they turned his performance up to like a 9 or something. But he grated on me, just a touch. He didn't get matered or minioned or anything like that. He was just a little more than I would have liked. There's this one scene where him and Hope are just sitting in a car talking, and he really irked me. He didn't annoy me at all in the first one. So, I don't know, I wish they would have handled him a little bit better. Let's talk about Ghost for a second. She was played by Hannah John Kramer, and she gave a very convincing performance. You believed her character, her story was interesting, she looked outstanding, the effects on her were absolutely incredible, they were unreal. Seeing her on screen may be the closest thing we ever get to seeing Tracer from Overwatch on the big screen. She was interesting, believable, sympathetic, and completely forgettable. She's not in the toilet bowl of villains, right? Like Malekith or Whiplash, but she's definitely not in the upper echelon of villains either, you know, like with Loki or Thanos. Same goes for the other antagonists of the movie. Not bad, you don't want them off the screen when they're there, but man, there's just not much there aside from not completely sucking. I had a good time with Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I think if you're invested in the MCU like just so many people are, you're gonna enjoy it too. There are 2 end credit scenes, and by a long shot, the first one, that's the one you need to stay for. If you skip the second one, doesn't matter at all, but make sure you watch that first one. It's very interesting. I would give Ant-Man and the Wasp an 8 out of 10. It's a sequel that, in my opinion, works better than the first one and builds on plot points that are brought up in the first Ant-Man and other MCU movies. I really enjoyed it. What did you think of it? I really want to know. Let me know in the comments down below. You can find me at nocturnaldisney@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at Disney Nocturnal and on Instagram at the Nocturnal Disney Podcast, all separated by underscores. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, go watch some movies. Good night.